But when you look at the landscape of the nation, Alabama, I believe, is the best team. I'm ranking Clemson number one based on their resume. Their two statement games came against serious competition in Auburn and Louisville on the road. As I mentioned, I just can't imagine anybody else in the nation taking Vanderbilt to the cleaners like Alabama did. Not just 59-0, but statistically, it was like a high school football game taking on an SEC team. What do we know at this juncture of the season as we approach October 1st? What have you gathered from the results thus far?
Yeah, what I take is there's not one dominant team. I think Alabama's good, but if you look at Clemson, they've got the same formula they had last year, a very good defensive front and a mobile quarterback. I don't know that Kelly Bryant is as good as Deshaun Watson yet. He has time to develop, but they have that same formula that they beat Alabama with last year. I think Oklahoma obviously doesn't have the defense that those two teams have, but they had a mighty fine performance against Ohio State, and they have an offense that can keep up with most any team. I think Baker Mayfield is a fantastic quarterback. His completion percentage on downfield passes is really, to me, what separates him. I think the Big 12's got a couple teams. Oklahoma State with Mason Rudolph's powerful, a big arm and a couple talented playmakers on offense. Again, probably not a defense that can stop some of these other big teams, but their offense is an offense that has the capability to keep up with people. Don't look past TCU. They had that big win against Oklahoma State. Kenny Hill is a dual threat quarterback. He can throw the ball and run the ball. That's really what gives dominant defenses threats these days, when you have to respect the quarterback passing and running. So they have a chance to make some noise as well. It's going to be interesting to see TCU play Oklahoma. Out west, I thought Oregon was back. They had a disappointing loss last week to Arizona State. Washington's kind of flying under the radar after a weak game against Rutgers, but they have a lot of talent there. Stanford's disappointed. USC went to the wire against Texas. I think they have a lot of talent there. It's going to be interesting to see if Clay Helton and T. Martin can keep that offense rolling and if that defense can stand up. And then you go to the Big Ten. Not sold on Michigan. Wisconsin has one or two important games a year, and then Ohio State is already behind the 8 ball with their loss to Oklahoma. So it's a lot of good teams there. Penn State looks pretty good. Saquon Barkley looked fantastic against Iowa, even though Iowa took them to the edge. But all in all, I think the only thing we know is that there's parity in college football at the top, parity amongst the tiers of college football. When you get that top tier, the 4 teams out of the Big 12, or 3 teams out of the Big 12, 4 teams out of the Big 10, really one team in the SEC, maybe Auburn can get in there. They had a really good loss against Clemson. Clemson out of the ACC and a couple teams out of the Pac-12. I think there's parity in that top tier, and then parity between like teams 13 and 35, and then parity between teams 36 through 60. So I think there's parity, not necessarily professional level parity, but parity in the tiers of college football. There's no 1 or 2 dominant teams that seem destined to meet in the championship game.
That Iowa-Penn State affair was a fun one to watch in Iowa City. I was really locked in on that one. Iowa had their formula working where the front seven on defense was dominant. They got just enough offense. They were being completely abused in the box score for the first half, but they had a 7-5 lead because they turned a turnover into points, and they had, again, the formula at home that they've displayed a few times against top 5 teams working. But then Saquon Barkley was amazing in that game with about 350 yards all purpose, and Trace McSorley with a beautiful throw off his back foot where he just whistled it through there on the money. USC coming off a tricky game at Cal that I would expect their talent to take over in the second half. That game was tied with about 10 minutes left. Now they've got a tricky one in Pullman. This one reeks of upset. A Friday night at Washington State. Luke Falk, 14-1 TD to pick ratio, and what he can do on offense. It should be an interesting one to see USC try to survive. Washington State and Mike Leach.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I haven't made my pick on that one yet. That's probably the one game this week that I keep going back and forth on. I'm leery of those games, like you said, that just reeks of an upset. I'm leery of those games because those are the ones that generally turn out not to be. I wanted to go with Memphis against UCLA. I didn't do that. I kicked myself because that was another game that you just knew it was had upset written all over it. UCLA with an 11 a.m. Central Time start for a West Coast team. You kind of don't have that here, but you do have USC going up north to Pullman. So I'm going back and forth on that one. That's going to be an interesting game to see if Luke Falk can win that game in his arm. The thing about Washington State is they usually, for the past 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of hype on that offense, and does Mike Leach have the Cougars ready to spring that offense on the nation and kind of finally take that next step in the Pac-12? And they've never quite gotten there. They've never fulfilled their potential, as I would like to say. So is this the year, or will USC put them back in their place in the second tier of the Pac-12? This is going to be a very important game in the Pac-12 race on Friday night. I can't wait for it.
All right, talking college football with Mike LaValle from Last Word on College Football. Mike, we always appreciate you stopping by.
Always a pleasure to join, Mark. Appreciate it.